Welcome to Identity Management Day. My name is Julie Smith, and I'm the Executive Director of the Identity Defined Security Alliance, and I want to thank you for joining us today. IDSA is a nonprofit that provides vendor-neutral education and resources to help organizations reduce the risk of a breach by combining identity and security strategies. Our membership is comprised of leading identity and security vendors, in addition to our customer advisory board, who provide guidance on our mission and represent the practitioner community. We are very proud to host Identity Management Day on behalf of the identity and security community. The idea for Identity Management Day came from Centrify, one of our member companies, and today is the result of 6 months of discussions, collaboration, planning, and execution. For several years, the IDSA has been focused on raising awareness about the importance of identity management and securing digital identities. We believe this identity security connection is critical. The Verizon Data Breach Investigations report has consistently revealed that 80% of hacking-related breaches involve a weak or stolen password. Our research has shown that 79% of organizations suffered an identity-related breach in the last 2 years. Credentials have become the prime target for hackers and the easiest method of breaching an organization. High-profile breaches in the past year have all involved shared or stolen credentials. And then almost overnight, the pandemic forced the world online like never before. Organizations across the private and public sector and almost all industries suddenly had employees working remotely, accessing corporate resources from home computers and personal devices. And our personal lives went online too. We were shopping, communicating, and even attending school online. And the bad guys took advantage of our poor password behavior and the disruption in our personal and work lives. The importance of securing digital identities had hit prime time, and with it, the urgency for this day of awareness. And we couldn't think of a better partner than the National Cybersecurity Alliance, the hosts of Cybersecurity Awareness Month that happens every October. With that, I'd like to introduce you to Kelvin Coleman, the Executive Director of the NCSA. Kelvin, thanks so much for partnering with us on Identity Management Day. I can't believe it's finally here.
Julie is here. Happy Identity Management Day. I mean, what an exciting time, and partnering, with you and certainly IDSA, it was just a natural step for us. I mean, as I've said to so many people, Bruce Springsteen needs the E Street Band, and so we're the E Street Band in this. Hootie needs the Blowfish. We're the Blowfish. But it's really great being with you here today, and finally, Identity Management Day.
Yeah. So Kelvin and you and I have spent an awful lot of time over the last couple of weeks talking about Identity Management Day. And I know National Cybersecurity Alliance brings quite a bit of attention to cybersecurity during the month of October. So talk a little bit about why this day is important for the NCSA and what we all are collectively trying to do with the importance of digital identity and security.
Julie, just like you, my primary job is to convene, right, to educate and to amplify best practices. And, only through those three things will we be able to really, better educate people on identity management, because there are some low-hanging fruit things there that people can do on a daily basis to protect themselves. And so for the National Cybersecurity Alliance, again, it was just a natural fit to partner with you. And certainly I want to just say your leadership has just been absolutely incredible. No surprise there at all. But I think the audience needs to know that, you're the drum major leading this band. And we're so very thankful to take part in it.
Well, it's great to have you, and it certainly has been a team effort. And I think Jen Cook and Justin Price from your organization have done an amazing job contributing to the team. We're very excited that it's all come to fruition today.
Yes.
And so appreciate everything you've done to support the initiative. In addition to our panel that is coming up after the awards announcement, we have 2 great events planned this afternoon that are hosted by your organization. Maybe you can tell us a little bit more about those events that are happening.
Absolutely. So at 2 o'clock, we're going to have one of our portfolios within the National Cybersecurity Alliance is called Cybersecurity My Business, led by Zarmina Wasim. And so with Cybersecurity My Business, we have webinars, probably every other month or so, where we're reaching out to the small and medium-sized businesses and certainly small and medium-sized enterprises in general. And today we're going to be talking about identity management. And folks can certainly register, still time to register. Go to staysafeonline.org to register for that. So we're very excited about the Cybersecurity My Business focus on identity management today. And then at 3 o'clock, we're going to have a Twitter chat. And I love the Twitter chats because that's an opportunity to almost crowdsource these resources and tools, and people are able to just go in that chat and say, hey, well, here are other resources to help folks manage, identity management, right? And so you have that back and forth, and that's going to be at 3 o'clock. And we're so excited to be able to do that and bring it to folks. We've had some success in our Twitter chats in the past, and so we know that this one is going to be just as successful. So it's 2 o'clock, Cybersecurity My Business webinar, focus small and medium-sized enterprises, businesses. 3 o'clock, Twitter chat.
Fantastic. Sit tight. We'll be back to you in a minute. And so we're also thrilled to have over 150 identity management champions. These are individuals, organizations, and industry partners who have shown their support for Identity Management Day. They have provided advice, they are sharing best practices throughout the day, and some are hosting virtual events. Make sure to check out the resources page on identitymanagementday.org for links to news, blogs, white papers, and more that have been contributed to date. And make sure to come back throughout the year. The Get Involved page has a link to all of the events happening today as well. And of course, follow hashtags IDMGMTDAY and Be Identity Smart on LinkedIn and Twitter for more resources and events. And now for the awards. As part of Identity Management Day, we also introduced 2 new awards, Identity Management Evangelist of the Year and Identity Management Organization of the Year. We were overwhelmed with the number of nominations and thank everyone who submitted. There are so many evangelists and organizations doing great things, but we could only have one winner. But we also wanted to recognize the 3 finalists in each category. So first off, the Identity Management Evangelist of the Year Award recognizes exemplary individuals who evangelize and progress identity management and security initiatives in their organization. They help protect their company against identity-related breaches and work to educate the broader industry on the subject. And our finalists in the Evangelist category are Bill Harmer, CISO and Chief Evangelist at SecureAuth, Mridula Singh, Founder and CEO of Next Schools, and Sam Tang, Managing Director of Cybersecurity Services at Ernst & Young. And I want to congratulate all of our finalists. Our winner is Tom Malta, Head of Identity and Access Management at Navy Federal Credit Union. Tom has been evangelizing best practices and principles of identity and access management through webinars and interviews, while also serving as an advisor to vendors and service firms. He demonstrates an innovative approach to building out both workforce and external-facing IAM programs by leveraging cutting-edge technologies and adopting appropriate standards. Whether working from a B2B or B2C perspective, Tom prioritizes a long-term strategic approach, ultimately safeguarding his organizations and any businesses who seek his advice. Tom, congratulations.
Thank you, Julie and Kelvin. Great to be here today on Identity Management Day. I want to thank all of you from the IDSA and also in Kelvin's organization and everyone out there that voted for me and nominated me, all the colleagues, peers, vendors, partners, many of whom I've known for a very long time and have become close friends over the years, for your support and for the nominations for this award. So thank you. It's been 20 years in this field. I've learned a lot from all of you, made a few mistakes along the way, but also hopefully made a tiny bit of a difference in the field I truly love and have a passion for. So thank you all again. I'm very humbled and honored.
Thanks, Tom. Sit tight. We'll come back to you in a minute as well. And on to the Identity Management Organization of the Year. This award recognizes organizations that go above and beyond to protect employee, customer, and partner identities and have implemented outstanding identity management and security projects. Our finalists in the organization category are Intermountain Healthcare, Sunrise Security, and Starbucks. Our winner is the City of Boston, led by CISO Greg McCarthy. The City of Boston initiated a complete transformation of its identity program in order to improve overall security posture and reliance on legacy systems and solve user experience issues. The project, Access Boston, was the culmination of a 2-year multi-million-dollar IAM program implementation. Access Boston better protects city resources through effective and efficient identity lifecycle management, access control, and account auditing. The project also enhanced user experience by simplifying and improving staff access to city applications and data from anywhere. Congratulations, Greg, and to the City of Boston.
Thanks, Julie and Kelvin. Happy Identity Management Day. On behalf of the City of Boston and the Identity Access Management team, I'd like to thank the Identity Defined Security Alliance and the National Cybersecurity Alliance for selecting us as the winner of the inaugural Identity Management Day Organization of the Year Award. The success of the IAM program at the City of Boston is truly due to an organizational effort. I'm extremely grateful for the amazing team of employees, consultants, and vendors, both past and present, that have helped build and continuously improve our identity management program. Their tireless effort continue to help make the City of Boston more cyber secure. Thank you for granting me the honor of accepting this award on behalf of this amazing team.
Awesome. Thanks for being here, Greg. Again, congratulations to our winners, and thanks to all who submitted nominations. And now for our panel discussion with this illustrious group. First off, I'd like to bring in one more panelist. Let's see if I can get him added to the broadcast. Stephen Lee is the Vice President of Technical Strategy and Partnerships at Okta. Stephen, welcome to the broadcast.
Thanks for having me.
All right, so now we're going to get started. I would just want to remind everyone that there is a ability to submit questions for the panel. We have a great set of topics to discuss, but we want to make this an interactive session. So would appreciate if you have questions for this this great group of folks, please submit them through the comments section. Okay, let's get started. First off, we need to set the stage, right? What does identity management mean to you? And Stephen, we'll let you get started with that one.
How much time do I have? So, you know, I think when people look at identity management, it's often tied to identity and access. You hear the term IAM a lot. I think the first thing that people start thinking about is, how do I control how somebody gets access to various resources? And I think, access is a big part of it, but when you really distill it down to identity management, the way I look at it is, it's really having this deep understanding of the life cycle of identities, of devices, of access provisioning. If you think about a lot of the disciplines around identity management, the audit piece, the governance piece, their main purpose is really to force organizations to go through that thought process, right? To really understand the life cycle of these various objects and to make sure that you implement the right controls. And when I think about identity management, I think understanding the identity life cycle is a big piece. Understanding how somebody gets access to something. At the IDSA, we talk a lot about this framework of understanding devices, network, compute, application, and storage, and how you go from a human through all the things that I just talked about, right? Using a phone, go through a router, hits an application server that touches an application that ultimately goes to a database to access a piece of data. Understanding that flow, or what if it's an application hitting an API, understanding that full flow. And that's the only way to truly understand identity management before you can even solve the problem. Where it gets hairy, though, it's where identity starts spilling into something else. I talked about access, where identity kind of spills and overlaps into access, security, networking. They're all tied to each other, so it's tough to kind of just put boundaries around identity management. But I think what we're doing at the IDSA also is to encourage that thinking of doing identity aware, being identity aware, and doing identity centric security, and that's a really big part. That's kind of the short 5-minute answer. I could probably keep going, but that's kind of how I see it. I'm always thinking about life cycle. It's understanding the end to end. I think that's a good way to approach the problem.
Greg, how about you? What does identity management mean to you?
So when we started our identity management journey, or at least our re-implementation of our identity management journey a few years back, we were struggling with defining it as well. We wanted to make a clear definition for how our users would understand what we're doing. So we really focused on defining it as the security discipline that enables the right individuals to access the right resources at the right time for the right reasons. So that's kind of how we broke it down. And I've heard identity described as the steel thread that holds the digital world together. And I really like that metaphor. I think it's spot on.
Tom, we can't let this question go without you weighing in.
Okay, sure. So for me, and I think the panel touched on a lot of great things. When we think of identity management, it's obviously the workforce, right, that we're trying to protect. We're frontline risk managers, right, protecting the firm, from the bad guys getting in. But then there's also the customers, or in our case at Navy Federal, what we like to think of as the members, right? So when you're protecting all of that, there's a lot of things to think about in terms of, what are the best things for me to tackle? It might be something regulatory related. It might be an efficiency gain. It might be a return on investment for a particular product. So just coming after it and making sure that you've got, good basic practices in place, right? And then you build upon that, I think, is what really makes a good identity management program, right? And making sure you're listening to, your stakeholders, your customers, your members, what do they want out of it? That frictionless experience that we've kind of seen on the customer or member facing side, also starting to see now move towards the workforce, and we need to offer that up to all our employees as well.
Right. So Kelvin, I'm going to bring you into this, right? So National Cybersecurity Alliance, staysafeonline.org. Clearly, there is an identity element to that. Talk to us about your perspective on identity management.
Stephen, Greg, and Tom sort of talked about it from an enterprise level, right? Corporation and what corporations or companies and organizations know about it. But we also talked about it from a strictly consumer level, right? How can a consumer, manage their identity? And I often think about, my parents who are a little bit older and trying to explain this to them. And, and I often say to my dad, well, you wouldn't go around giving your social security card, physical card, right, to just anyone. You go around giving your driver's license just to anyone, Dad, right? I call him Pop. I said, Pop, well, it's the same thing you're dealing with, going online, and you protect your identity. You protect that information, personally identifiable information, which, Julie, you've touched on in the last couple of days when we've done interviews and spoken to different people about the bad actors keep this as gold these days. This data, identity that we have and we have to protect. And so at the National Cybersecurity Alliance, we also look at it from a consumer level in terms of how can consumers protect themselves, or as Tom said, members, right, of NFCU. And so we really encourage people to do very low-hanging fruit to protect themselves. I look forward to talking about some of these things a little bit later on.
Awesome. Thanks, Kelvin. We do have a question. I'm going to give this one to Greg. Hopefully, Greg, you're prepared. Tell us what the first steps should be on the journey to identity and access management success.
That's a great question. I think the first steps in the journey are identifying some project champions in your organization. So one of the big things that our program worked on was forming this governance structure. Many people think identity access management is a technology process or a technology project, and really it's understanding how the business functions and how people move throughout the organization, and how access and whether it's granting or revoking that access changes while people move throughout the organization. In the government sector, there are a lot of long-term employees that move throughout the organization in different roles throughout their career. And so it's really important that we don't just continuously add on access to that person's role. So it's really making sure you learn the business process, and that's the starting point before you even think about implementing technology to assist drive that business process and make it more efficient.
Tom, 20 years in the identity and access management space. I'm sure you have a few ideas to throw in the conversation.
Yeah, I think Greg touched on some great points. I think that, to add it, where do you begin in the journey, right? If you're just starting out, start with foundational basic stuff, right? Do you understand who's coming in and out of the firm? Are you even managing your identities properly from onboarding and offboarding? A lot of times managers, will call up the help desk. Hey, I got this guy. I need him to start today. I need you to give him credentials, right? But when he leaves, everybody forgets about that, and the guy ends up having access for too long. Another thing I'd like to touch on is orphan accounts, right? Big problem in our industry right now. What does that mean? Well, accounts that get left behind, like either people that have left the firm, accounts that might be used in testing, or accounts that are unidentified as to an owner, and just sitting out there and maybe still active and enabled. Make sure you understand who owns your accounts, right? And start with cleaning them up. And also, Greg touched on the transfer process, people moving around the firm. Most dangerous identity event there is, guys, right? It's not the leaver, it's the transfer event. It's the accumulation of those privileges and that toxic combination of access that can get you in a lot of trouble. So definitely start with those basics. And then, as you mature, you start to add, more controls, more layers to it. But, getting the foundation right is so important. I can't tell you, how many times I walk into a company and just basic things aren't operating correctly, right? So you need to focus a lot of time there to start there and get it right.
Yeah, great advice. Anybody else want to weigh on this one before we move on?
Yeah, I definitely want to, I think Greg brought up a good point, right? Identify the champions. As a vendor, right? When I walk into a prospect or a customer, you realize how many different organizations within a company think that they own the identity, right? You have IT folks, you have the person that's hosting your directory, you have HR, you have people that are bringing things to your office, setting up your chairs and desks and all that. They all own a little bit of identity, and the only way to ensure success is also make sure there's alignment. You definitely can't just do it within one group, because, like I said earlier, there's that natural flow of an identity as it moves around the company, starting from day zero to the last day, as Tom pointed out, right? If someone leaves the company, how do you make sure everything works? That, it's a combination of physical access, combination of HR and everything. And I think it's important to identify all that and make sure that nobody gets left out, because ultimately you're going to need everybody's voice and all that ammo to help you, satisfy the requirements. And that's a very important piece. So a lot of people forget about that, and they try to solve the problem themselves, and then only to realize, well, they're running into walls because other people are not in agreement. So if you get to identify all the champions first, that's a very big piece.
Great. Thanks, Stephen. So as you can see on the bottom of the screen, follow those hashtags. There are tons of resources that are being posted out into social media today, that provide advice and best practices and steps to a successful identity management program. So I encourage you guys to check out those resources that are being published. Brad, I have a question for you. What were the identity technology limitations that drove Boston's transformation?
Sorry, I lost you at the very end of that question.
Sorry about that. What were the identity technology limitations that drove Boston's transformation?
So I think some of the bigger challenges were really around efficiencies. We had a lot of manual processes, people creating accounts manually. We weren't relying on a central identity store. We had some legacy architecture that was failing. We really needed to ensure that we were able to support our employee population and access to critical applications in a secure manner. So we realized that a reinvestment was required in order to actually accomplish that. We went out for RFP. We identified an implementation partner. We did many discovery sessions with our business stakeholders, understanding where some of the pain points were. But we really wanted to ensure that we focused on how we can implement a new program in the most secure fashion possible. We were originally, our identity management program was under our applications group, and part of this project was to move it into our security team, so under my team, in order to ensure that we were focused on making sure we're reducing risk when we're adding efficiencies into some of these business processes. So I think I answered the question that people were asking.
Yeah, actually, there's a follow-on question to it. You talked a little bit about it's important to have a project champion in order to implement a successful project. Can you define the qualities and sort of the purpose of a project champion?
Sure. So I think it's better if the project champion is not a technologist. One of our big project champions in the city was our CFO. That's always a really great person to have as your project champion because they hold all the money. So we can always ask for additional money. But having a champion that is a non-technical person is really beneficial because it helps. Some technologists speak nerd language, if you will. So speak techie language. So it's sometimes difficult for people to understand what we're trying to do or explain complex technical solutions in a simplified way. So I think having a business stakeholder as your project champion is really good, is really beneficial.
Tom, in 20 years, I'm sure you've had successful projects, and champions have probably been a key component of that. Do you want to weigh in?
I think Greg touched on some great points. I think stakeholders are important across the company, right? Because IAM is an investment. I think Greg touched on it before as well. It's not just a project, right? It's a core function of the company. And it's definitely one of the most, if not the most important thing in your cybersecurity framework, right? So having your constituents across your business line supporting that, setting up a governance structure which allows them to weigh in, give you direction, new business things emerging that you might need to shift, course a little bit, and just really, frankly, to make sure they're part of it and you're being collaborative, right? I think you'll find that the wins will come easier that way because they'll be behind you and you've got their support all throughout your journey, which we all know in this space, excuse me, and the people on the phone, this is a 3 to 5 year project, right? If you're just starting out. So it's an expensive long-term function that a lot of people need to see value in, right? And if you bring them in, keep them close, keep them part of your core team, you'll be very successful in that.
Great, thanks, Tom. So I mentioned earlier that the focus of IDSA is to highlight this identity security connection. And so a question for Greg, we're kind of picking on Greg today. Should identity management be part of an organization's security program, and why or why not?
So as I mentioned, prior to this re-implementation project of our identity management program, our program lived within our applications group, and it did move to the security team. So I am slightly biased. I do think that an identity management program, it's beneficial for it to be under a security program. I don't think it has to be if there is a strong security governance program within your organization. But I think there are definitely benefits to having it within your security program. One good example or one reason why is because generally product teams are focused on end user experience and ease of use of their products. And it's not always something maybe easy to use, but may not actually be secure. So it's really finding that fine balance. One example that we struggled with at the City of Boston, when we were rolling out multi-factor authentication, we realized that we were going to need to offer the use of personal email address for the delivery of users' one-time passcodes. That's not the most secure. One, because we don't have control over their personal email address, so it's likely that they're not using MFA on their personal email address. It's likely that they're using a password that has been either potentially compromised or is used on a whole bunch of other applications or services that this individual uses. So we realized that there was a risk with allowing that, but we knew based on our user population, we needed to allow it. What we ended up finding that balance with, it was making it a little bit more obscure and a little bit more challenging to actually register a personal email address. We forced people to go through a registration process that forced them into a phone number or the app, using an app for your one-time passcode, instead of allowing them to choose whichever option they wanted to. So we did a little bit of security through obscurity, but we were able to deliver it in the lowest risk possible and the most secure fashion possible.
Kelvin, want to weigh in on this particular topic of identity security?
I'm so sorry, Julie, you cut out a little bit at the end for me.
Yeah, so what are some of the, should identity management be part of an organization's security program?
Yeah, I'm gonna really pick up where Greg left off in terms of, identity management. In some ways, is a decidedly non-technical issue, right? Greg gave the example of his CFO, who provided tremendous leadership, right? That is the first prong in this thing, having tremendous leadership of folks who are going to be your sponsors, are going to enable you to do what you need to do. And second thing, that your communication, in terms of helping enterprises and individuals to understand identity management and how to really help them out. Am I still, sounds still a little tricky?
Yeah.
A little bit.
Sorry about that. It's probably on my end. So I'll wrap up by saying I really do agree with Greg.
That's awesome. That's a good one. Okay. So we had another question in the audience from our participants. talking about multi-factor authentication and how adoption is somewhat painfully low. And what do we believe are the main obstacles preventing organizations from broader deployments? Stephen, you want to take that one?
Yeah. I think, I don't know if it's our fault or it's the end user fault, but I think the factors themselves are tricky, and we've introduced so many different variations of that. You have, physical tokens that you need to carry around with. Oftentimes it is your phone that you carry with you. I think on the one hand, as you're using that second factor to try to get into, to try to get your access, it seems to be an easy thing enough to do for end users. Where it fails usually is the beginning of that process, which is issuing the token, issuing the factor, the requirement for user to enroll. And then there's also the other side of it, which is if I need my second factor to get in, and let's say I lose my phone, or if I lose the physical token, how do you go about recovering that? And what if it's urgent and I'm in an airport and someone stole my phone and I still need to get into my laptop to get to some application? I think it's when you look at those, we call them edge cases, but they're actually not edge cases. They're things that every user has to deal with. And there is a problem there. Like if it's as easy as me going to my phone and just hit accept and get into an app, that user experience is great. But think about this whole environment of working remotely. If there's a physical token that I need to get from IT, how am I going to get it day one at work? I'm probably not going to go to the office these days. How do you issue that? What if you lose it? Do I issue a couple backups on day one when you get it? So I think a big part of it is that, right? It's less about the understanding of using a second factor, but it's all the stuff that goes around the administration of a second factor, in my opinion, is a big part of the problem.
What kind of another question that ties into that, when, and I apologize, I'm trying to do it at the same time, when users don't have a mobile device, are there other options for a second factor? Maybe not based questions, or what are the recommendations?
Yeah, I mean, you do have there are physical tokens that people can use. If you don't have a smartphone, definitely I've seen some people resolve to, doing things like text and SMS. But as we all know, the security around that is debatable. And so I think and I'm not going to say even a phone is necessarily the best thing. Some of the things I brought up earlier, right? The phone itself can be tricky too if I move from one phone to another. Right now, I think even at a personal level, I can tell you, like, there's so many second factors that's tied to this that if I lose this right now, I'd probably have trouble getting into the bank, getting into my health account, getting into my kid's school website to look at her pictures. I'll be pretty stuck. The phone is a good compromise because it's something that every end user has in this day and age, pretty much. We definitely do neglect some part of the population where smartphones might not be something that everyone has. But we definitely don't want to go back to the old days of carrying a keychain with something else extra. We've all gone through those days, and those were painful too. That's not to say those things are not relevant. I think there are some use cases where having a separate physical token would still make sense. I've heard customers where they work in certain environments where a cell phone is not allowed, and they have to basically have something else. So like I said, I think a big part of the complexity is on the different variations of MFA that we have that we are dealing with, and also just the administration around it. There's no good answer. We haven't quite cracked enough to have a seamless MFA experience for administrators and end users. they were always sort of slapped on band-aid type of solutions that's been going on for 15 years, and we're still going on that journey. But hopefully we're getting closer to having something better.
Thanks, Stephen. So, Tom, I want to shift gears a little bit. What are some of the top ways many people do not properly manage their identities?
Oh, hey, Julie, sorry, you came across solo. Could you repeat? Sorry, I can't hear you. We can't hear you at all now. I think you muted yourself, possibly.
I'm trying to figure out how to reduce feedback coming through. Sorry. What are some of the top ways many people do not properly manage their identities?
Oh, yes. So I think, there's a lot of different ways that you can do this on, in terms of a personal level, right? Just make sure Stephen touched on it, where possible, if you can use two-factor authentication, for your different apps and your devices, that's a good way for you to protect it. Make sure you're not using commonly, easy to guess passwords, right? If a site gives you an opportunity to have a more complex password, try to take advantage of that, right? An 8-character password can be cracked in 3 hours or less on a laptop, right? So you want to be thinking of these things as you're trying to protect your identity. Another thing, social media in general, for the people out there looking for some advice there, don't necessarily put all your information out on social media, guys, right? Where you live, how old you are, what your kids' names are. That's not a great idea, right? What your birthday is, right? I mean, if you look at my Facebook account, I think it says I'm an astronaut and I was a male model, and like all these other lies that I threw out there. So some of them were true, some of them were not. So just be aware of that. I think just, self-preservation, if you will. I'll be honest. I mean, my account's been hacked numerous times as an identity professional, and from various different major sites. And it's scary, right? When you have to go through this, like Stephen said, God forbid you lose your phone, right? What are you going to do? When I leave the house, if I drive a mile and I realize I forgot my phone, I'm turning around, right? I got to go back and get it, right? So, yeah.
It's true for sure. Kelvin, do you want to weigh in on this one? I think maybe if we mute everybody when they're not talking, we might be in a better place. So let's give you a try again.
Okay, yeah, maybe it'll work out this time. And did not know Tom was a male model, so it's great. Something else we find out. There's not a lot I can add to that, because it's absolutely true in that, we often tell people, think before you click, right? And that seems like a very simple thing, but it's so important in today's world. Because as I'm doing interviews with media or other folks who want to know how the bad actors are attacking folks these days, and they always want some exotic, sexy, super interesting way other than phishing. And it's like, no, phishing is still pretty popular with bad actors. And they said, well, no. What's the thing that they really use? I said, well, spear phishing, like they would with Tom, or well phishing, and so by that, what we tell people is think before you click, right? If you have for example, a financial institution sending you something and saying, hey, here's a link where we need your personal identifiable information, social security card, or, you need to, then that, you can delete that right away. Because no financial institution is going to be asking you for that, as Tom can so well, probably confirm. And so we really encourage people to just use almost common sense with these things in terms of think before you click. Multi-factor authentication, again, is a really great thing to help manage your identity as it relates to consumers. And so these things, again, seem like low-hanging fruit things that, not very exciting, but super, super effective. Because the last thing I'll tell you, what I tell people is that, in order to stop, I'm not even going to go into COVID, but flu or cold, your health provider would tell you, well, wash your hands and cover your mouth and cough into your elbow. These are not terribly exciting things, but they're very effective, right? They're super effective in stopping, well, at least slowing down the spread of cold and flu and things of that nature. Same thing when it comes to managing your identity, making sure you have a robust password, you're thinking before you're clicking, multi-factor authentication, not sharing your information. Again, I'm talking the consumer level, not sharing your information with folks who should not have it, period. And so these are things I think can go a long way in helping folks.
The thing that I think is interesting about it is all the things you just talked about. Employees, if I'm wearing my employee hat, I need to be practicing those exact same good password habits, right? And organizations can only go so far in terms of enforcing those password policies, but I think employees need to carry a bit of the load as well, and make sure that they are doing the things to protect those corporate credentials, right? Because where we think of it as an individual, and what's at stake with us as an individual, just think about what's at stake is when you're wearing your employee hat. If someone gets access to that corporate credential, and can then move around and do a lot of damage. So I think everything you just talked about is amazing, and I think it applies both in our wearing our consumer hat as well as our personal hat. I know there's some folks that want to hear from this group about the future of IAM. What types of functionality, security tools are on the horizon? I know passwordless is popping up in the comments quite a bit. So Stephen, I'm not sure if I mute yet. There we go. I'm going to let you take that one and weigh in, because I know in your role, you spend a lot of time looking at emerging technologies. And obviously talking to a lot of customers, and would love to get your take, and then certainly we'll get other folks involved in that topic as well.
Yeah, I mean, I'll touch on passwordless a little bit, and this is taking my vendor hat off just as an identity specialist, right? Obviously it's been a pretty hot topic, as somebody mentioned. I personally, I think I told you this, Julie, I ran into this ultimate experience a couple weeks ago. You laughed at me when I told you I did some yard work, but I basically spent the weekend, did a little bit of yard work, and my fingertips got smooth, and the Touch ID didn't quite pick up. So turn on Face ID from my phone, it's working great. Dropped my kid off at preschool and wanted to show the teacher a picture on my phone. Couldn't do it because I couldn't take my mask off. So I couldn't do Face ID. So there was a moment there when I thought, oh, I guess passwords are here to stay. So not saying passwords are here to stay, but we're still a long way from having sort of really effective passwordless. I think it's a very tempting word for people to use, but at the end, we need to think about all the alternatives, and even passwordless login, whether it's biometric related, or other sort of nifty things by picking up your motion when you have the phone in your pocket. All those things still very nascent. I think a lot of these technologies are being built around the phone because that seems to be the thing that everybody has, right? Is that going to be the case going forward? Let's say 5 years, 10 years from now. I think we've all gone through a portable device overload in the last 15 years, and we keep changing. I'm sure, I'm dating myself here, but I'm sure there was a time when everyone thought Palm Pilot was here to stay. Guess what? I don't even know where mine is. We need to be reactive to how the world is changing. I think the devices that people are using to access things are changing. You have obviously, laptops that people are still using. But increasingly there's tablets, and you look at even game consoles, right? People are needing to access games as they're playing. They put on their their VR goggles, and then there's a need to sort of also authenticate users there. It just becomes it's easier said than done. Let's put it that way. I would hate to say that password are here to stay, because I don't believe it is the most secure thing, but in the meantime it is still something that's being heavily used, and I think it's important for every individual or even professional, right, to make sure that they adhere to the password policy, that they don't fall into the traps of reusing the same thing or using something that's easy. make it hard for people, right? Back to kind of what Kevin talked about earlier around consumer identity and how people hack. It's about making it harder. You can never sit here and say it's 100% foolproof. But if you think about it from the hacker's perspective, you just need to make it tough. They go by the volume. They're not going to sit here and waste 5 months to try to get into an account. Within 5 minutes, if they can't get, or maybe even less, right? If it's a bot, they're going to move on, and you're just going to have to put on the right defense and make it hard for them. But back to the trend, I think you'll continue to see people wanting to look at ways to eliminate the need to type in a username, to type in the password. But I think there's still going to be a healthy balance of the password world, and then some of these newer things that are coming up.
Any other sort of emerging trends or things on the horizon for IAM? Obviously, passwordless, zero trust is a hot topic these days. Anything else that decentralized identity, I know, comes up quite a bit. Any other things you want to talk about where we're headed?
Yeah, decentralized is one, giving end users more control, especially on the consumer side of the information that's being shared. So both decentralized as well as sort of self-sovereign identity, those are big topics. It's interesting, right? Those topics mean a lot to us here and the people that are probably listening to us, because we have some identity knowledge. When you give control to somebody who knows nothing about identity and let them control their own attributes and things like that, even for a normal person to go through a simple, consent, acceptance of allowing your attributes to be read by a website, all that is actually pretty complicated stuff for normal users. So we need to think a little bit about that when it comes to decentralizing and self-sovereign identity. Behavior is a hot topic too, right? That if you start understanding the baseline of what someone's doing, that the devices that the person uses, the maybe keystrokes, the places where this person would go, the types of application, time of day, all those, right? It's becoming a pretty hot topic too. If you're able to set the baseline, I like to tell people that it's amazing that when I show up at home, my mother knows that it's me. She'll never ask me for a password, right? But what's the combination of clues that she's got that it really is me? I think there's my face, there's the way I talk, but there's also context, right? A lot of it is behavioral, is context-based, that I sound relevant. I'm talking about things that would resonate with her. And so try to spin all that into sort of the digital world of being able to identify behaviors, both on the consumer side as well as in the workspace for workforce identities. I think that's a big area that people are looking at, and with the increasing ability to analyze data, the compute power and data storage, I think people are really able to do some pretty fantastic stuff that would have taken hours, if not days, to do back in the day. But now it's within seconds that a lot of the stuff can be carried out in real time. So I think that's definitely an area that I see a lot of folks are moving into.
Yeah, I think those are all super interesting things on the horizon. I guess I'll jump on my soapbox here for a minute. It feels like, at least for the foreseeable future, passwords are here to stay. And so someone mentioned a World Password Day on May 6th. And hopefully there's some best practices that are coming around passwords. I guess the other thing that, while I'm on my soapbox, and Tom, I'm going to ask you to weigh in here, is I feel like sometimes we forget that a large majority of organizations are still just wrestling with the fundamentals. And just still the basic blocking and tackling. And I know we did, the IDSA did a research report recently where we talked about the challenges that stakeholders run into related to getting access to applications. So that's obviously a productivity type of benefit, but also, to your point earlier, Tom, about how long it takes to revoke access for employees who have left the organization. So I guess maybe I'll unmute you there and let you talk a little bit just about the importance of sort of the fundamentals and some of the things that you have written about for the IDSA in the past.
Sure. Thanks, Julie. I think you guys are very passionate about the whole password topic, so I love it. I would add that when we talk about fundamentals and in your organizations today, single sign-on, right, is really important, right? Are you protecting as many apps as possible with your single sign-on? Because if you have your identity governance administration solution tied to your identity events, tied to your single sign-on store, whatever that might be, when that lever comes through, you can disable all of those applications, right? Completely automated, no human touch. If you now got local stores of applications with local authentication and happening in multiple different places, now you got to tie all that back together, right? It's not just Tom_Malta or T Malta 37. It's, ABC4J credential, because that's what the vendor decided they were going to give me when they created my identity, right? And that's very difficult to manage. So definitely something that you want to think about. And then Julie's point about efficiency gains, just-in-time provisioning, for instance, right? In terms of when people are coming into the firm, think about the common set of things that they need. And I'll get into roles for a minute, right? But roles are not always good. If you try to put all your entitlements into roles and do an RBAC program that just creates thousands of roles, you'll fail, right? In fact, 72% of companies that try it, real stat, fail at it because that's what they do. So look at your coarse grain stuff, start to narrow that circle down into the very common set of things that people really need, basic access, and then tie that to roles and then tie it to automation, right? So when people come in the door, I know a lot of you on the phone, I guarantee, are saying, hey, how do we fix the onboarding process? Tom, it takes me days and weeks to get people the right access, right? And why is that, right? Well, maybe because you've got all sorts of different repositories, you've got multiple applications that don't have single sign-on, you've got manual provisioning, right? So start to think about, work with your business partners, right? We talked about that, those stakeholders earlier, right? Those champions. Find a friendly, right? Get a model together, right? Get that basic set of core access for that business unit and tie it to automation, right? And get it working. And that will be hugely successful for that business unit. And then everybody else will jump on that bandwagon, right? And that's one way for you guys to, sort of justify your IM programs, right? Because people want to see results. And it's really not that difficult if you just kind of tighten up the curve. Don't try to solve and boil the ocean, right? Bring it back down again to basic fundamentals and start there.
Great. Tom, quick follow-up question. Where does the 72% number you referenced previously come from? Do you know the reference?
That's an old Gartner stat. It's a little dated, so I'm dating myself. But it's a stat I used often. That RBAC often fails, and it's mostly the proliferation of roles, right? And yours truly, I mean, I've implemented numerous role management systems. Some of them were failures because of that reason. In fact, the very first one was a grandiose failure of a huge magnitude. But I'm happy to say I've learned a lot, right? And coarse grain is definitely, when we think about future state of IM, just-in-time provisioning, zero trust, coarse grain access, right? Fine grain dynamic authorization as opposed to tying it to provisioning. Reduce your certification workloads, right? We don't want people certifying access rubber stamping like the traditional old IGA model, right? So we got to get more efficient. We got to be smarter about this, right? And that whole zero trust concept, it can't be any more important than right now, particularly since we're all working remote and really need to make sure we know who people are, right? That identity proofing layer becomes really, really important.
Thanks, Tom. I know we're right at the top of the hour, so I want to give sort of everybody else one last opportunity to provide advice on Identity Management Day. So Greg, why don't we start with you?
Sure. So I think it sounds, or it is, a large undertaking. Identity and access management programs are challenging. They're not easy. But going back to working with your business understanding how your employees, if you're doing employee-based identity management, how your employees move within the organization, focusing on, as Tom mentioned, joiner and leaver to start with. You can get huge benefits from just identifying how those processes work, identifying what birthright access, essentially, what we call birthright access, the package that your standard employee receives when they're onboarded, and the access, the electronic access that they are granted when they're onboarded, and then revoking that access when people leave the organization. That's huge from a security perspective. So focusing on those things will give you huge benefits. You'll win over your HR department for sure if you can make your onboarding and offboarding processes much more streamlined. They will be happy to be champions if you can convince them that this will make their onboarding and offboarding processes easier. And if your program is not within your security team, your CISO or your head of security should also be a huge champion for your program. So that's where I'll leave it.
Perfect. Thank you. Stephen.
Yeah, I think we've touched on a lot of things, and we've discovered some of this as throughout our IDSA effort as well, which is there are lots of fundamental problems that people have not solved yet, and they really need to look at that. We'd like to talk about the future. We'd like to talk about passwordless. I think, Tom, I known you for a long time. I know, you've gone through the whole RBAC journey, and now it's passwordless, and people talk about dynamic authorization. I think those are things to pay attention to, but for a lot of organizations, there are some fundamentals that you need to look at. I'd like to, just to, at least for me to wrap up here, I like to think of identity and access as kind of a hotel key when you go to Vegas or wherever, right? You don't get the key forever. You don't get the key the moment you book your room. It's more of a just-in-time thing, even more just-in-time than provisioning. But you only get the key when you can use it, when you're supposed to be able to get to your room. And they're able to cut off access whenever they want, right? So think about something like that, where it's a little bit more dynamic. Even if I know your password, it doesn't mean you could have access to everything, right? That's kind of where the future is going. Authenticating you is one thing, knowing it's Stephen, but can Stephen do X, Y, Z? Break those up and start looking at this problem. Again, spending time looking at the fundamentals. I think a lot of organizations are still very much behind, and we'll continue to think of the future. But I think that there's a lot to be done still to get the fundamentals right.
Kelvin, words of wisdom to close us out.
Yeah, be identity smart. That's, and you don't have to do this alone. You can go to IDSA website. So many resources there. And guess what? Their website points back to our website. You can go to NCSA's website, staysafeonline.org. Our website points back to Julie and IDSA. So my word of advice is you don't have to do this alone, right? There are resources out there to help. So visit our websites and be identity smart.
Thank you. I want to thank everybody, all of our panelists, for the great conversation, and thanks for everyone who joined us today. Follow the hashtags you see at the bottom of your screen. And then last but not least, I want to thank the team that helped put on Identity Management Day. Jen Cook and Justin Price from the NCSA, Brad Shoemake, who is Identity Management Day Chair and Centrify Director of Corporate Communications, but unfortunately he was unable to make it today. Lisa Garcia, also from Centrify, Christina Lamphere, and Alyssa Pilati and the Touchdown team. So thanks so much to them. Today couldn't have happened without that group of people. And we hope today was a great reminder for everyone to be identity smart. Thanks and take care.